All right, so it's finally here. It's the release week for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. I'm absolutely hyped out of my mind for this movie. This is by far my most anticipated movie for the year. I can't wait to go see this. I'm going to see it twice this week, going to see it Thursday as well as on Saturday, and I'm literally just buzzing with excitement. But something that did temper my expectations just a little bit today was seeing that the Rotten Tomato score started to come out for this movie, and right now, currently, and it's still dropping, this movie is sitting at a 79% on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, for most movies, that wouldn't be too bad, but for a Marvel movie, they typically sit somewhere in the mid-80s to low 90s, and this is pretty much indicating that this is a very mixed bag reaction to this movie. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to go through with you guys and just look at some of these Rotten Tomatoes reviews, because there's over 100 of them at this point, so we got plenty to look at here. But I'm just going to kind of pick and choose and go through some of the best and the worst ones, so that way we can get kind of an indication of how people are feeling about this movie. But nevertheless, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so this is a popular critic, Richard Roeper from the Chicago Times. He says that this is one of the weirder Marvel movies yet. He gives it a 3 out of 4, so let's see his review. With the deadpan gray Benedict Cumberbatch effortlessly sliding back into his role as the brilliant, immensely powerful, but sometimes short-sighted and narcissistic Dr. Stephen Strange, in a bizarro plot that serves up philosophical, ethical, spiritual mind games in between sometimes repetitive, slick, and exhilarating action sequences. This is one of the weirder Marvel movies yet. I mean, that's not what we didn't expect, right? I mean, the movie's titled Multiverse of Madness, so we're expecting some sort of over-the-top things to be happening in this movie. And he goes on the next paragraph to say that this is mostly a good thing. He says it feels like a Stephen King story. Since Raimi was the director of the Evil Dead franchise, which I actually personally did not know that, you can kind of see some of that, I guess, in this movie, which I'm actually really interested to see. Wanda fully embraces her villainous side as she embarks on a violent and ruthless quest to find that corner of the multiverse in which she really is a mother to those 2 children, even if they aren't real in her current world. He goes on to say, if you think that sounds complicated, we're not even at the beginning of the labyrinth, mind-bending, and impossible things that we're about to see. This sounds awesome because this is one of the main things that I wanted to see in this movie. Was I wanted to see Wanda go down a really, really dark path. She's been kind of pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed for multiple movies now. And now she's actually going to start embracing this and kind of being the bad guy in a way. And I don't know, I'm for it. I want to see her be the villain in this movie. With each passing scene right up until the stinger of a conclusion, that's very interesting, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness grows increasingly weird, convoluted, and dark. Yet what sticks with us most is not the ongoing story of Stephen Strange, but the existential nightmare engulfing the tragic Wanda Maximoff. This is super interesting. I mean, what's this stinger ending that he's talking about? Is Wanda going to say her classic line of no more mutants, or what is she going to do? I mean, I feel like that she's going to be the conclusion of the movie and she's going to do something absolutely insane. So like I said, I'm really excited to see what she's going to do. All right, so let's jump into a negative one, and this is from another top critic, from Nick Schager from the Daily Beast. A summertime sequel that proves too messy and geeky until it manages to double back around again into pleasurable absurdity. So let's see what he's got to say. All right, so this is an interesting statement. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness has its director's fingerprints all over it, whether it's with regards to the brazen horror-ish elements, monsters, undead, candlelit satanic rituals. That's interesting. I mean, we saw that from that clip of Wanda surrounded by the candles, I guess, and we've obviously seen Zombie Strange and various other things, right? All the Raimi trademarks are a brilliant effect. Jolting zooms, topsy-turvy curved angles, whooshing pans, helter-skelter shots from POV and malevolent forces. I mean, this doesn't sound too different from the first Doctor Strange. I mean, it was the same thing. The world was upside down. There was a bunch of spinning elements. So I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens, but it doesn't sound that much different to me. Unfortunately, though, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is not an unmitigated triumph. On the contrary, Raimi's maiden MCU contribution is all over the place, scattershot affair that leaps in between so many universes and various versions of familiar faces that on a narrative level is designed to provide some sort of whiplash effect and with all the camera work. All right, so admittedly, I was going to skip over this, but I really want to talk about this, though I can't pass it up. He kind of dives into a little bit of some of the reasonings why Doctor Strange and Wanda end up having this conflict. And what he says here is, her reasons for her nefariousness is that she wants to locate another universe with her kids in it. We talked about that in the last guys. review. But anyway, what he says here is that Doctor Strange understands her desires for this because he has the same desires to be with Christine, who is the woman from Doctor Strange 1 that's getting married at the beginning of this movie, from what I understand. And he objects to a crazy plan which pits them against each other. So this gives us an idea of why they're fighting, is because they both want the same thing, to be with a loved one, meaning Wanda wants to be with her kids and he wants to be with Christine, but Doctor Strange again is just like trying to be reasonable, saying that we can't just go around the multiverse trying to find different things like this because she's crazed to find her kids, and he's just like, no, we can't do that because we're gonna mess everything up. And of course this is gonna lead to the conflict, I guess. All right, so we're gonna go into kind of a medium review. We're gonna go into Laura Clifford's Reeling Reviews review, and she gives the movie overall a B, and her opening statement is, this is an odd entry into the MCU. This is gonna be good. Part of her opening statement is that this is another multiverse movie that follows the heels of Everything Everywhere All at Once, and like that film, this proves that the concept can be exhausting in both complexity and repetitiveness, which I can see that. Like with movies like this, you really have to love complex storylines, like Inception, for example. That movie was really over the top. It took me multiple viewings to kind of get the overall concept, and I can get, as a first-time movie watcher, if you're not really into that and you want to go into a comic book movie and have just a good time and not have to think a ton about it, I get why this would maybe be a little bit overwhelming, and that might be part of what's leading to the kind of mixed reviews. She goes on to talk about two scenes with Strange and America Chavez that were really brilliantly done. One of them in particular really interests me, and I can't wait to see this one. And she's talking about this during the film's climax, in which Strange inhabits another version of himself, which happens to be dead and rotting. That's the zombie version of Strange, and that kind of explains how that character comes to existence. So I'm really interested to see how that's going to work, and it should be pretty awesome. All right, so just cutting down to the very last part of her review, where she gives her overall thoughts on the movie. She talks about how Cumberbatch and Olsen really dive headfirst into these characters. They raise the stakes, and overall it just makes the film more enjoyable. She goes on to say, but just like Olsen's conflicted characters, so goes the film. Fun, yet too many universes. Great special effects, but so much of the CGI was really simple. She goes on to say that there are two end credit scenes. She says that they're not that great. One of them actually pays homage to Raimi's own original franchise, which I'm guessing is the 3 Spider-Man movies. So that should be interesting, but it's sad to see that they're maybe not that integral to the future of the MCU, but nevertheless, I always stay for all the end credit scenes anyway. All right, so next we're going to take another look at a positive review from Emmanuel Noisette. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. He's from the Movie Blog, and he says that Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness was a thrilling adventure of wild imagination that became next level MCU. All right, so he's got some pretty interesting things here in the good section. He talks about how director Sam Raimi perfectly executed the right amount of jump scares and eerie situations that give a nice startle from time to time. In addition, the cinematography and editing were both effective and unpredictable for the most part. And he says, best of all, Raimi doesn't shy away when things get pretty violent. I mean, this, like I said, this is really fascinating to me because typically the MCU has always been pretty lighthearted, and we know that to this point, and that's why it's viewed as more kid-friendly compared to the DC counterpart. And I think that that's exactly why this movie, in my opinion, may not perform as well as a typical MCU movie. I mean, obviously you can already see from the ratings of it having a 79, it's already kind of underperforming critically. But at the same time, just even the box office, I feel like a lot of parents are going to see this and say, man, I don't know if I should take my kids to see this because of all the violent scenes that everybody keeps talking about. The biggest compliment he gives the movie is about Elizabeth Olsen's portrayal as Wanda. He talks about how Olsen gives a exceptional performance as Scarlet Witch, especially given the complexity of the character struggles. And the fantastic thing is that she will scare you when she wants to be scary. He goes on to say that when she feels pain, you empathize with her. And it's fair to say that she pretty much steals the movie, which I find pretty interesting because it goes back to what I said a little bit ago about the fact that it feels like Wanda is almost as big of a part, if not a bigger part of this movie than even Doctor Strange, even though it's titled Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. The last part he says about the good is that he says the scene with the said cameos all showcase some of the most exhilarating action and sensational moments that will keep you on the edge of your seat. And I cannot wait to see this. I think he's talking about the Illuminati scene in particular because we're going to see a ton of reveals, not only Professor X, but we've already seen some of them in the trailers. But like I said, we'll see exactly who we're going gonna get, but nevertheless, if he's saying he's jumping out of his seat screaming for him, then I'm all for it. So to highlight his one gripe with the movie that he talks about, he says that the Illuminati scene was just a little weird overall. He talks about how he has the problem he has with it is that it seemed utterly ridiculous as to why they were coming together for this supposed imposing threat. He uses the example, he says, for example, it would be as if someone was worried about an eviction notice for their home, and meanwhile the house is literally on fire. Obviously you'd put more focus on the latter, but ultimately their decision making felt like a thin plot device just to have a certain situation forcefully play out. So that's kind of disappointing because, you know, this Illuminati scene is the most advertised thing in the trailers. It's one of the biggest things of this movie because we're finally getting to see mutants and all the various other things, and we're getting introduced to a whole nother side of the MCU we haven't seen before. So it's a shame that from what he says in here that the Illuminati scene feels kind of off and not really properly placed in the movie, but you know, we'll see what happens. All right, so I think that these 4 reviews kind of give us a gist of what to expect in this movie. It's definitely a mixed bag. There's a lot of things that people like and a lot of things that people don't like, but the main thing that I can say is that everybody has come to the same conclusion that it's complete madness. Whether you like the complete madness is gonna be up to you, but at the end of the day, it's exactly what the title says, is Multiverse of Madness, and we're gonna get nothing but pure madness from start to finish in this movie. I do like to hear that Wanda is actually gonna be the main villain in this movie from what I understand, and that's the thing I really wanted. That was the #1 thing that when I was thinking about this movie and kind of my expectations for it was that I wanted Wanda to be the primary villain for the movie because she's perfect for that role. And then the one thing that's kind of disappointing is in that last review, the guy talked about how that the Illuminati is kind of like a forced scene. It didn't really seem necessary. It was cool and there was all these cameos and various things like that, but it didn't really feel necessary for them to come together, and they didn't really have a purpose. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of the gist I got. So I'm excited. I'm going to see this movie tomorrow because it's Wednesday now when you're going to see this video. But nevertheless, do some of these reviews actually temper your expectations for this movie? Do they get you more excited to see this movie? Let me know down in the comments below. But all right, that's it. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.